Hey, what's up? This is Chuck D. You are listening to Toronto Mike right here, right now, in the place to be.
What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1666, 1666 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Yes, we are open. An award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by FOTML Grego. Silverwax.ca. Use promo code TorontoMike10 at checkout and save 10%. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Building Toronto Skyline, a podcast and book from Nick Iene, sponsored by Fusion Corp Construction Management, Inc. and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, making his Toronto Mike debut, is Glenn Milchem. Welcome, Glenn.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
So, what is the rule for that sweater? You don't just wear it for special occasions. Is this just you're going out and it's not quite warm enough for a t-shirt sweater?
Well, this sweater, actually, my wife bought this sweater in Ecuador before I met her. So maybe 25 years ago, she was in Ecuador, and she bought it, and she tried it on. She's like, this thing's way too itchy for me. And so she just put it in the bottom of her closet for 25 years, and I never even saw it. And then she was doing a sweater purge, and there were like 3 clear plastic garbage bags of sweaters sitting in our backyard, and I saw this one. I was like, what's that sweater?
Yeah. Well, it's got a bit of a little bit of a Charlie Brown vibe.
I've heard, yeah, Charlie Brown. Somebody said like Johnny Rotten, which I like that one.
Well, that's even cooler than Charlie Brown.
Yeah, well, it depends on how you look at things. But yeah, it's a bit of a Charlie Brown thing. But it's just a nice sweater. It's warm. I think it's alpaca or something. My wife said. Anyway, yeah.
But is it itchy? That's my big question.
No, not itchy. Not to me.
Okay. Well, good. I just love it. It's a cool looking sweater.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Longtime fan.
Thank you.
First time interviewer. Okay. Right off the top, though, I thought we'll take a moment to remember somebody who I just learned this morning passed away. And then this might be a pretty brilliant segue into finding out like when you fell in love with the drums and maybe go back before we get you to Blue Rodeo. But let's listen to a little bit of Blondie. Glenn, how you as a professional drummer for Blue Rodeo, how's the drumming in this song Dreaming by Blondie?
Well, I actually love this song, and I love the drumming in this song, and when I was a kid, this was one of the songs I would drum along to. A lot of my practice in my early teens was just putting on records I liked the drumming of, and playing along to them, and this is actually one of those songs. Are you going to tell me that Clem Burke just passed away?
I know. Now that I'm hearing you, I realize you don't know yet, and I hate to be the guy to break it.
No, I did not know that, and that's very sad.
Away.
I love Clem Burke, and as soon as you put that on, I was like, oh, this is actually really appropriate because I used to drum along to this song, and I'm sorry to hear that Clem Burke passed. He was awesome. I remember seeing Blondie at Ontario Place. I don't know, probably 1980 or something like that. They were fantastic. And yeah, he was great. I always loved Clem Burke.
Well, I thought he might be an inspiration of yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was great.
Now, other inspirations. We're going to bring you up. I got a bunch of old songs. Not old songs, but I have some songs that feature you pre-Blue Rodeo. I wanted people to get to know sort of the Glenn Milchem before Blue Rodeo, and then we'll talk, of course, about Blue Rodeo and what you're up to these days in addition to Blue Rodeo.
Cool.
Congrats off the top, though. We'll kind of go forward before we go back, but congrats that you're on a freaking stamp.
Yeah.
Like, in your entire life as a drummer on Queen Street, like, did you ever think one day you'd be on a stamp?
No, definitely not. I never thought like, yeah, I gotta start playing drums. Maybe I'll get on a stamp one day. No, that's not something that ever occurred to me. I did, I guess if I'm totally honest, when I started seeing, they got Rush, they got Tragically Hip on stamps. Maybe one day they'll do Blue.
Yeah, you're next.
I never thought we were next, but I thought, well, maybe they'll get.
Well, they've probably done the Guess Who already. Like, if you go through the.
Yeah, I don't know if they've done the Guess Who yet. I'd be surprised if they haven't. But they've done a bunch of people. And anyway, at any rate, it's weird but quite wonderful.
You know who's next after you? It's Sloan is after you.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. Apparently, all you have to do is you can make suggestions to Canada Post, and then they have like a committee of people that sort of go through it. And apparently, the CEO of Canada Post suggested us, so we were kind of a shoo-in. Maybe you should go through him first.
Give me his contact info later. So I've seen this montage. All of you. I mean, even my former Michael Power schoolmate, Mike Boguski, is on this stamp. Okay?
Well, yeah, he's in the band. He's been in the band for 15 years.
He's in the band.
Anybody who didn't get fired or quit is on the stamp, as they should be.
And we're gonna run through all this history. But did you pose for the stamp? Or
Oh yeah.
So
we
like
had a formal photo session.
You look good on this stamp. Like when you saw the stamp, you're like, oh, good, I look cool.
Yes, I was like, thank God, yeah.
People
I'm
are gonna
happy with my photo.
People are gonna be licking you across.
No,
this
they're
country.
not actually. They're self-adhesive.
Oh.
Obviously, you like me, like many of us, have not used stamp in a long time. Like when I said to my kids, like, guess what? I'm going to be on a stamp. They were like, stamp? What do you mean a stamp?
What's a stamp?
Yeah, like my 16-year-old was like, stamps are not part of her world. And I realized like, oh yeah, this is like an old person's honor. But I'll take it. But
it's a good excuse. I mean, we'll talk about the doc. There's been a lot of Blue Rodeo, a lot of good excuses to talk Blue Rodeo lately, which is always a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But a stamp is a good excuse to kind of just talk about Blue Rodeo. You're on a freaking stamp, so they can't take that away from you, right?
I guess they can't. No,
it's not like the Order of Canada where they can strip it from you if they want to.
Maybe recall all the stamps and
it's too late.
Put them on a bonfire.
It's too late. Okay, so in addition to Clem Burke, sorry, the late great, and sorry that I had to break that bad news to you that Clem Burke
that's
passed
okay,
away.
But I am sorry to hear that. He was a wonderful drummer for sure.
And that song really does show off his skills, I think, best, Dreaming. And shout out to The Deuce, which is a show I love. And season 3 of The Deuce had that as the theme song. So dig it. Okay. What other inspirations did you have when you're coming up?
Well, my father was and is a great lover of music. Listening to music, in particular listening to jazz, has always been kind of his number one hobby. He didn't play an instrument, but he's like a really deep listener, and I was kind of aficionado of jazz and music. So growing up with that, I think music just kind of had a naturally important place in my psyche. And I don't know what exactly drew me to drums. I was 8 years old when I suddenly just became fascinated with drums. I had a next door neighbor, a guy named Carl Hughes, who used to look after my brother and I. I have a twin brother, John. And this guy, he was like, he was about 8 years older than me. So like when we were 8 or 9, he would have been 16, 17. And he was really cool. And in his he played drums, and he had this amazing Ludwig drum set in his basement, like double bass drums, 4 toms, Zildjian cymbals, just like this gorgeous kit. He was a really good drummer. He was super cool. He had like Soft Machine posters and stuff up on his basement wall. And So I often wonder if he's the reason that I gravitated towards drums. I'm not sure, or if I just kind of had an inclination. But suddenly, at the age of 8, I was fascinated with drums. I begged my parents to take me to drum stores. I remember having the Ludwig drum catalog and poring over it religiously.
But good parents, if they're into like jazz and classical and all this, like, drums, that's pretty cool parents, I think, that they let you go down that path.
My parents were unquestioningly supportive, which I, didn't really think about until I was older. We actually, I think it was last year, Massey Hall, when they did their renovation, had their new seats and everything, they said they said to members of Blue Rodeo, you guys can have like a commemorative plaque on a seat, and with a little saying of your choosing. And mine said, which was really nice of them, that we played Massey Hall more than anyone except Gordon Lightfoot. We're about like 100 shows behind Gordon Lightfoot, but
there's still time.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. But mine was like, I want to thank my parents for never questioning my questionable career choice, and. So they were really supportive, and but they bought me a pair of bongos when I was 8 because they didn't want to invest in a drum kit in case this was like a, just a passing fancy. And so I just played the shit out of the bongos for 2 years, and they went, okay, I guess we'll get you a drum kit. So I got my first drum kit when I was 10. So that was, I sort of grew up in that environment where music was really important, and I was, I liked jazz and jazz drummers because of my dad, but I was also at that age, my first sort of musical passion was Alice Cooper. When I was 9 years old, I heard Schools Out on the radio.
Right.
And I was with my cousins from England, Alvina and Moveen, who were older. I was 9 years old. I remember this vividly. We were sitting in the parking lot at Black Creek Pioneer Village where my dad had taken them, because they were tourists from England.
Learn how to churn the butter.
Yeah. When it was they had
I dug those trips, man.
Yeah. They were putting the shoes on the horses and stuff. Yeah. Blacksmiths and what have you. So I remember sitting in the parking lot and Schools Out came on, and it just blew my mind. And I said to my cousins, who's that? And they said, Alice Cooper. And I was like, who's she? And they laughed at me, and I couldn't believe that there was some dude named Alice Cooper that... Well,
the band's name was Alice Cooper, and he
he was also Alice Cooper. His real name is Vincent Fernier, if you want to get technical, but sure. Nobody calls him Vincent. He's Alice.
Hell of a golfer, too.
Apparently. But anyway, so I was obsessed with Alice Cooper, and then I got into prog music. I was really into Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So at first my influences were kind of, I liked rock music, but I also kind of then started really getting into sort of more technical type drumming, like Yes, Genesis, CLP. And then when I was 15, I heard punk rock and new wave. And so then I got into that, and then I actually literally trashed all my old prog records, which I regret now. But at the time, that seemed like the thing to do. And so then I went off in that direction. So all those things kind of formulated my style, whatever that is.
Can you name that tune, Glenn? Did you know?
No, I cannot name this song.
There is multiple...
What the hell is this?
I was going to point out there's multiple bands named Vital Signs.
Oh, this must be another Vital Signs.
Yeah, this is Mandalay by Vital Signs.
But they probably spell it S-I-G-N-S.
No.
They spell it S-I-N-E-S,
right.
What?
So I just don't know if you're aware of this Vital Signs.
No, I was not aware of that, but that's a copyright violation.
It depends on
going
who.
after them.
But tell me about, if you don't mind, tell me about your Vital Signs.
My Vital Signs, Vital Signs. Actually, Vital Signs was the third band I was in. The second band I joined when in Toronto. The first band I joined in Toronto was a band called 04, who were made up of some basically people from the Toronto punk scene. It had, I think, 2 members of The Ugly. Not the original Ugly, but the second Ugly. That was Tony B on bass and this guy Chick Parker on guitar, and then there were also members of Dick Duck and the Dorks. There was a guy named Casey on saxophone.
Dick Duck and the Dorks. I did this Gary Top panel discussion, and
Right.
there was a lot of talk of Dick Duck and the Dorks.
They were very. They all worked for the Garys.
Yeah.
And they played the Edge a lot. I think they were kind of like the Edge house band, but they were
Right.
very much a kind of central figures of the Toronto scene in the late 70s. But this is like I guess 82 I played with them. 82, 83 I started playing with them. I just answered an ad, and actually I put an ad in Now Magazine hoping to form a band, saying like drummer looks to form a band, and they were like, well, we already have a band, but we need a drummer, do you want to come in audition? So I did. And actually the singer Lynn is on the cover of The Last Pogo. She's the woman that's sort of
Wow.
on the front picture there with a bunch of buttons on her jacket. So yeah, I only did about 4 gigs with them, but someone who was at the time was acting as the manager of Vital Signs saw me play with them and said, "Oh, I manage this band called Vital Signs. They're looking for a drummer. Would you be interested in coming out?" And I did. So I was like, sure. So I went and auditioned for them, and I remember the bass player Terry telling me, like, we are the second coolest band on Queen Street next to the Rent Boys. So I was like, all right, okay, and so anyway, I joined Vital Signs, and and that was kind of the beginning. They were really kind of the beginning of my involvement in the real beginning of my involvement in the Toronto music community, and really the beginning of my career, because we went on to a certain degree of regional success, and also because we had a video on Much Music, a song called Collage that got played a fair bit.
Oh, that'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we never toured nationally or anything like that. That was kind of unheard of in those days. Like I'm talking 1984, independent bands. There wasn't yet a kind of trail blazed for independent bands to tour across the country, so we mostly played Toronto and the surrounding area. But
I was reading that Vital Signs was like Simple Minds meets Gang of Four.
Yeah, that's a good description. I mean, that's what we were trying to be. How successful we were at that, but I would say those 2 bands were probably the bands that influenced us the most at the time.
Okay, and share with me the other bands that you were in when you were playing the Queen Street circuit here in Toronto.
Well, there were a lot. From Vital Signs, I then joined a band called the Garbage Men, which included the ex-sax player from the Rent Boys, because the Rent Boys moved to England to sort of find fame and fortune, which then didn't happen. They actually did get on the cover of NME at one point, so they had a sort of a brush with it, but then they broke up. Okay. And Howie Zephyr, the sax player, Howie Zephyr, he came back to Toronto and formed the Garbage Men, and so I ended up with them, and then and that was a band that stuck around for 5 or 6 years. We just played residencies. We first had a residency at the Quoc in Kensington Market, and then we moved to the Cameron, where we played every Wednesday for like 4 years. Wow. From 84 to 88. And then I also joined a band called Groovy Religion, which was led by William New, who's also known for booking Elvis Mondays, which was like a really important night that lasted for over 30 years, where he just basically every week he would have like 5 independent acts play, like a 15 or 20 minute set, and that was kind of how like dozens and dozens of Toronto bands first set foot on stage because of Elvis Monday. And I played in Groovy Religion off and on for about 25 years, I think. And this Groovy Religion, then I joined White Noise, who were kind of an Ornette Coleman influenced jazz funk band, like kind of a harmonic jazz funk band, which was a really fun band to be in and a great education for me. Learned a lot about playing in odd time signatures and stuff and polyrhythms playing with them. And then from then on, those are like the first sort of 4 bands I was in, and then I was just played in, I was in Plasticine Replicas very briefly. I've just played in dozens of bands, and I did sessions, and then eventually I joined Andrew Cash and toured with him. There. Speak of the devil.
Looking at a shop display of fancy jams from the south of Spain. A lady said, "Ma'am, can I help you?" I just say no. Walk back out again into the morning rain. The smell of mocha cream on my friend. I put my hands into my pocket. And what do I find? Just two cold hands kinda look like mine. I don't wanna live in this boom town no more. I don't wanna judge my life by what I can afford. I don't wanna live in this boom town. Well, it's
Andrew Cash, Boomtown. You're playing on this album.
Yeah. We recorded this album with Don Dixon, who was one of the producers on the first REM record, which is, I think, why Andrew wanted to work with him. We recorded this down in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that was a fun experience. I haven't heard that in decades. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I had Charlie Angus over earlier this year, and well, of course, L'Étranger was Charlie Angus and Andrew Cash here,
Yeah.
and so they're having a moment like this, and Charlie Angus anyway is becoming like part of the resistance here, and he's having.
Charlie is like the greatest politician in the country, and Andrew was an MP as well,
Yeah.
It makes me sad he still isn't, because Andrew just always had his heart in the right place. And I remember when I played with him, he was so political. Sometimes I'd be like, man, you got to stop talking about politics and just play the songs. Which now I think like, oh, I was an idiot. Like, because he was really speaking truth to power from the stage from day one. And a great guy, a great songwriter, one of the most prolific songwriters I've ever worked with. And it was a great experience. Playing with him and touring with him. I love both Charlie and Andrew. I wish Andrew was still in Parliament. I think Andrew became the victim of what do you call it? That type of voting, like strategic voting.
A lot of NDP candidates
Yeah.
are going to be victims of strategic voting
Yeah.
in 3 weeks.
Yeah, which and Andrew was one of those in a couple of elections, and I feel it's a shame because he was, I think, a great parliamentarian and just a great person.
Well, Charlie has only 3 weeks left as a parliamentarian.
Which is sad, and it's sad that the reason he's walking away from it is because of, harassment, because of people harassing his family and stuff like that, which is a terrible state of affairs, because like he's an invaluable asset to the country.
He'll have more time for Grievous Angels. So there'll be more music.
There'll be more music.
A lot more music.
That's a
from
good thing.
And he feels, I don't know, like I asked him, like, why not? Because now there's this renewed popularity with the Trump threats. And I said, you should change your mind. And he feels he can be more powerful from outside. So we'll have him as part of the resistance outside of Parliament. Maybe he can speak his mind louder without being part of the system.
I'm sure whatever, I respect whatever choices the man makes, and I'm sure he will make good use of his time, no matter what he's doing.
But that Boomtown was huge. Like so here we are in 1988. You got your first taste of like what I'd call like major label, activity. So it was huge, that Boomtown.
It did well. It got a lot of radio play. I don't know if it resulted in huge record sales. I don't think it did. I think it may be respectable. But, let's see. Actually, he left Island after that record. I was going to say he got dropped, but he didn't get dropped. He decided to leave Island, which may be business. He was on Island Records, which maybe business-wise wasn't the best move, but that was his choice at the time. And I ended up I was in the process of doing demos and pre-production for his next record when I got called up to join Blue Rodeo.
Right, in 1991, you get the call from Jim. We're going to get to that. So when you're with Andrew Cash, though, you could leave the comfy confines of Queen Street West because you guys went to Europe, you went throughout Canada, to the USA. You're on an extensive tour with Andrew.
Yeah, I was touring a lot with Andrew, and I did kind of, I was, sort of on the Queen Street scene a little less. And then Andrew also went through a quiet period, and while that was happening, I was playing with this guy, Andy Curran, for a while.
FOTM Andy Curran. That means friend of Toronto Mike, much like yourself now, Glenn. Welcome to the... I got gifts for you in a moment. But Andy Curran, of course. Andy Curran. Monkey Bars.
Monkey Bars was the song with Coney Hatch. And he was an original member of Coney Hatch, who he's still playing with. They're still out there.
Sure.
But at that time, Coney Hatch had broken up, and so he started a solo career, Andy Curran in Soho 69. So I ended up doing that for a couple of years, and which also kind of took me away from, the local scene. That was a very different world altogether. That was the world of hair metal.
There's another band I want to ask you about. So just before we give you that, you're going to get a call. There's a call coming to you in late 1991, and that'll introduce like a whole new segment. But before we get there, my guests on Wednesday, Change of Heart.
Oh, amazing.
So tell me about pre Blue Rodeo playing with Change of Heart.
Well, that was actually not
concurrent.
That was actually concurrent.
Right.
They both kind of happened at the same time. Like Ian called me, Ian Blurton. Their drummer, Ron Duffy, was, I think he had some physical issues like back problems or something like that. So they were about to record this epic record, Smile, which is like would have been a double album. What's that? It is a great album. It's got great songs on it, and it was like a joyous experience making that. But so he was like, Ian called me, and he's like, so can you play on this record? And we're gonna do it live off the floor. And I forget how many songs. It was like 25 songs. I had to learn a whole bunch of songs, and then we rehearsed, and we all rehearsed together. And then we went into the studio called Reaction and did the whole album in 4 days. And I think I recorded Smile, and then the next week I was in the studio. I'm getting ahead of myself. And
for Lost Together.
I was in the studio recording Lost Together with Rodeo. So that all happened like the first couple of weeks of 92.
Okay, then one more name to throw at you before we talk some Blue Rodeo, and then there'll be more names after. But there's a gentleman, I think he's I can't get him over here. Busy man, doesn't live here, but Colin Linden. Like, can you tell me about playing with Colin Linden?
Oh, yeah, I did play with Colin for a while. Well, yeah, he's in Nashville, so yeah, it's hard to get.
Yeah.
You think he could fly up?
I feel like, is it Oh Brother? He played an Oh Brother, right? I'm trying to think of the...
he might. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on that. He has had an association with Buddy Miller, which I think has brought him, into a few soundtracks and things like that. I know he was on the show Nashville. He was involved in that, in the music for that. I even played with Bob Dylan briefly, I think. Wow. But Colin at the time was still based in Toronto and was playing roots music. He was like a blues prodigy when he was a kid, and but yeah, he had released a few really great solo records. And Gary Craig, who's a great Toronto drummer, who I still actually share a drum chair with in Action Sound Band. We kind of split the duties for that band between us, depending on who's available. And but I was subbing for Gary Craig, who was Colin's drummer. And so yeah, I did probably, played I don't know, not a ton of gigs, but 12 to 20 gigs with Colin in the late 80s, subbing for Gary, which was great for me, actually, just because Gary is a very different drummer from me, especially at that time, and I learned a lot about economy and playing the song and how to sort of tell a story on with your drum parts, how to play the song on the drums, because Gary's really great at that. There's a reason he's still working 40 years later. And so that was a great experience.
Now, Glenn, I'm trying to collect all members of Blue Rodeo, past and present.
Yeah, you're getting close.
We'll get to that in a moment. But I'm trying to also, I'd like to have all members of Blackie and the Rodeo Kings as well. I've had Stephen Fearing's been over and Tom Wilson several times. So Colin is a missing link. So if anyone out there can get me a direct line to Colin Linden, I need to talk to this gentleman. Absolutely. So here we are now. We're ready for you to get the call. But I'm going to give you a few gifts first. And then we'll find out how you end up in Blue Rodeo. And then, as you can imagine, I have a bunch of Blue Rodeo questions. And then there's questions from the listenership that they've sent in. Oh. And I think you'll dig these, actually. Mostly non-Blue Rodeo related, actually.
Cool.
Where do I begin? You're about to, Glenn, you're about to get a whack of great stuff. I'm going to tell you now, in my freezer upstairs is a large meat lasagna from Palma Pasta. Do you enjoy lasagna?
I love lasagna. This is wonderful. I didn't know I was going to get a free lasagna. That's
Well, you know why? Because Greg Keeler got nothing. You know why?
Didn't visit the basement.
No, he didn't visit the basement. I can get vegetarian lasagnas, but he zoomed in. He didn't get anything. But so I have. This is an empty box. But before you leave, you'll have a large lasagna from Palma Pasta. Much love and thanks to Palma Pasta for sponsoring the show, and they'll be feeding us at TMLX 18, which is going to be June 26th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Great Lakes Brewery. Everyone's invited, by the way. But speaking of Great Lakes Brewery, they have sent over some fresh craft beer for you, Glenn.
Sweet.
So you got beer and lasagna.
I like both beer and lasagna.
And they go well together, actually.
I like both of them, both those things quite a bit.
Well, but wait, there's more.
Oh, my God.
Okay, I know. Who's that? Billy Mays? Is that his name? Who's the guy who... But wait, there's more. I think his name is Billy Mays. Anyway, not to be confused with Willie Mays, the late great. Okay. Might be the greatest ball player of all time, Willie Mays. Okay. Ridley Funeral Home. These guys are pillars of this community. They're at 14th and Lakeshore. They have a great podcast called Life's Undertaking, and they have a measuring tape for you, Glenn.
Oh, wonderful.
And subscribe to Life's Undertaking because I get to co-host that show, which is a lot of fun.
Okay.
And while you're, Glenn, I got you subscribing to shows. Subscribe to Building Toronto Skyline from Nick Iones. Our next episode will be all about the CN Tower, which is turning 50 years old. 50 years of the CN Tower.
Yeah.
Do you have memories of the Skyline pre-CN Tower?
I do. I vaguely remember that. I certainly remember when the CN Tower was being built and, when it was finished and what a big deal that was. The world's tallest freestanding structure.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah.
See, I don't have, I'm a little bit younger than you. I have no memory of that skyline without the CN Tower. Zero memory. I was probably...
My memories are pretty vague, I got to say. But I do,
Close your eyes, Glenn. Let's go back. Okay. But... Nick Iones, his podcast, Building Toronto Skyline, new episode Friday on the CN Tower. Subscribe, enjoy. Thank you, Nick Iones from Fusion Corp, for stepping up. This is exciting, Glenn. I have a wireless speaker for you.
Oh, wow.
Courtesy of Moneris. And you know what you're going to do with that wireless speaker? You're going to subscribe and listen to Yes, We Are Open, because Al Grego went to Saskatchewan and he collects these inspiring stories of small business owners for Moneris, and he shares these stories on Yes, We Are Open. And episodes from Season 8 are dropping now. Season 8 from Saskatchewan. I can't wait to tell people more details.
That's cool.
And I know Blue Rodeo. When Blue Rodeo does a typical Canada tour, is the only stop in Saskatchewan Regina?
No, we also play Saskatoon.
Saskatoon, okay.
Yes.
My first wife was from Saskatoon.
Oh, yeah. It's a great city. I love Saskatoon. A lot of beautiful women in Saskatoon.
You're telling me, okay. It's more than just Diefenbaker going on over there. I know he went to that university, and he was a big deal in Saskatoon.
I love Saskatchewan. I think it's like beautiful.
Because it gets not a bad rap, but people are like, oh, there's not much to do or see. It's just flat or whatever. Because then you got all these mountains in Alberta, and
they don't get it, man.
They don't get it. So please help me get it. Al will be on to talk about his trip to Regina, but I've never been to Saskatchewan, and
it's glorious. I think it's beautiful. And I've certainly heard that it's boring. It's like, I don't know. It's like I love driving through the prairies. I love the big sky. I love the open fields. I like this. I really enjoy the cities of Regina and Saskatoon. I'm a runner, and I love running in Regina. They have I think it's a man-made lake they have there, but it's beautiful. You can run around that. It's quite near the venue we usually play, which I think is called the Connexus Center now. These places always have new corporate names, so it's hard to remember them all. But it's actually also the halls in Regina and Saskatoon, they might both be called Connexus Center, but they're kind of identical halls. They're halls that were built. There's a lot of halls that were built in 1967 around the country, and those are often my favorite halls. They're just acoustically and architecturally beautiful, and they're great places to play. And I don't know. Also, when I play with Andrew. Andrew's first wife, Sandy Pandya, who's kind of a legendary music business manager. Her family was from Regina, so she kind of, when I would go there with Andrew, we would always kind of be welcome with open arms. So I've just always liked Regina. I don't know.
Well, you know what? You should work for the tourism board. I am sold. Like, I'm serious. I want to go to Regina.
Well, I believe in, like, especially, like, Blue Rodeo. Pretty much all our touring now is in Canada. So, we go back to these places again and again, and I believe in finding, what is good about a place. I don't just want to go like, this 10-6. Oh, no, we're not going there, are we? There's always something good in every town if you look for it. And
Regina's no exception.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to get my ass there. Al got there, and he's got season 8 dropping right now. Do you enjoy driving a nice, clean car, Glenn? Would you like that car spotless?
Yeah, I like being in it. Especially, I don't really care about the exterior as much as the interior. I want a clean interior.
Glad you said that. Okay, because I've got the most amazing gift for you, Glenn. This is unbelievable. It's only for April, so you got in the right time here, okay? Because it's Silver Wax. Silver Wax makes pro-grade auto care and cleaning technology easy for everyone to use. And they have kits for beginners, experts, or professionals. Everything you need, interior, exterior. I am giving you the most amazing kit. It's literally these 2 bottles and that bucket. And in that bucket I'm serious, this is everything you need.
I'm getting a bucket.
You got this bucket. You got to crack open this bucket and see what's inside it.
There.
Yeah, you got to get... It's heavy duty, robust technology here. So, Glenn, you're going to have the cleanest car inside and out. And I'm just going to tell the listeners that they can find Silver Wax at silverwax.ca, and the promo code TorontoMike10, TorontoMike10 at checkout saves you 10% off your next order. Silver Wax has been proudly Canadian since 1999, and that is not about to change, Glenn.
Yeah, damn right.
This song is epic, Glenn. The way it builds, the way it swells, the emotions it stirs up.
Strange and beautiful are the stars tonight that dance around your head. In your eyes I see that perfect look.
Want me to air drum?
Hope that doesn't sound
Thank you, Teenage Head, for the drumsticks.
Nice.
And I want all the world to know that your love's all I need. All
Also,
that I need.
super sing-along jam here, Glenn. Holy smokes.
And if we're lost, then we are lost together.
All right, Glenn, tell me about this phone call. How do you end up in Blue Rodeo?
Well, actually, the first phone call I got was from Andrew Cash, and he called me one day, and I think it was December or November '91, and he said, "Glenn, I think your ship has come in." And I was like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, Jim Cuddy just called me and asked if I would mind if you auditioned for Blue Rodeo." And so I was like, "Wow, amazing!" So, and then I got a call from Jim, and so I, bought a bunch of their cassettes, I think.
You got Outskirts?
I'm sure I did. I guess at that point there were 3 records out, so I would have grabbed So outskirts, Diamond Mine, and Casino.
And you know who produced Diamond Mine?
Yes, Malcolm Byrne.
And you played with Malcolm.
I did play with Malcolm Byrne, actually, yes. Before he moved to New Orleans, he put out a solo record. He was a member of this band, Boys Brigade, who were pretty hot. I guess they put out one record on Anthem, and Rush's label, and then he did a solo record. I guess they broke up, then he did a solo record, and then he was kind of a protege of Daniel Lanois, and so he moved down to New Orleans, where Daniel Lanois, I don't know if he'd set up Kingsway yet, but he was based in New Orleans, so I think he had set up Kingsway, so Malcolm went down there and became a record producer.
So you had to audition for Blue Rodeo.
I had to audition for Blue Rodeo, but the truth is they only auditioned 2 drummers. There was me, and there was another drummer. Unfortunately, his name is escaped me at the moment, and he's a really great drummer, but he was a jazz drummer, and like kind of a strictly jazz drummer, so kind of not the right guy. So I could have suggested 10 other people that might have been the right guy, but they didn't audition those people. They just auditioned me and the jazz drummer, and they were like, let's go with the more rock drummer guy. But the thing is, they already knew my drumming. They knew me from the Garbage Men. They knew me from Vital Signs. But they never considered me as someone who could possibly be a drummer from Blue Rodeo until they saw me play with Andrew Cash, who Andrew had a gig. We had a gig opening for them at Guelph University, and I think they saw me playing with Andrew, and Andrew's music was, of course, a similar style to Rodeo's. It's
Big time. That Boomtown, fits right alongside Try or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's like roots-based music, influenced by the band and the Beatles and Neil Young, and that's they're very common influences. So I think they went, he can do this too. He's not just like weird funk guy, or hard rock guy. So I played with them, and it worked. It sounded really good, and I adapted my style to them as best I could, which I did with everybody at that point. At that point, when I first started playing, I was kind of like, I'm just going to play music and bands that I think are cool, post-punk bands, And then I had a kid when I was 22, and then I was like, okay, now I have to actually, be a breadwinner, and I only have one skill,
right?
So I'm gonna have to, I'll play with whoever, And so I was just like, I will learn to do your thing, and I will play with you if you will have me, and. So, I did my best to adapt my style to Blue Rodeo, which took some doing. I'd say it took me years to really sort of find my feet with that band. But the thing about Rodeo is that Rodeo was kind of always about square pegs fitting into the round hole a bit. Like having Bobby Wiseman in the band, having, a guy who was... essentially kind of an avant-garde improviser in the band, sort of brought this other dimension to the band that I think they realized, hey, this is a good thing. This is a good thing not to just sort of get like a rootsy keyboard player. So I think, when they looked at me, they was like, okay, this guy's not just a rootsy drummer. He's someone who comes from a diverse musical background, and this could actually benefit us, which I think it did, ultimately.
Well, ultimately, you're on a stamp now, Glenn. Okay, you're on a stamp now. Blue Rodeo's still a going concern, right? You're still going to play in front of sold out arenas, and
hopefully,
of course. We love Blue Rodeo. My mom loves Blue Rodeo. There's not a lot of, I'll tell you the truthfully, there's a Venn diagram of the songs I like and the songs my mom like. And then in the middle, there's like 2 artists, I think. There's about 2 artists. Kenny Rogers and Blue Rodeo, where we kind of meet. And I've taken her to Massey Hall to see Blue Rodeo.
Nice.
It's, she fell in love, like, pre-Glenn, she fell in love with Try.
Right.
I think a lot of people, they heard Try and they were hooked. And, and Try, the drummer, of course, just visited my basement for the first time last month. He came with Mike Boguski, but Cleve Anderson. So one thing I find interesting is that we talk about Cleve Anderson, first drummer, founding member of Blue Rodeo, who, of course, he talked about why he left, and I talked to Greg Keeler about why he left, and Jim, and makes sense to me. You mentioned having a kid, right? So he's got a family, and he had a good opportunity at the post office, and he made a decision. But we do skip a guy, right? Because you don't take over for Cleve Anderson. You take over for Mark French.
Yes.
But it does seem like, and I saw the doc, we'll get to that in a minute, but it does seem like we skip Mark French. I guess he was only the drummer for one album.
Yeah, it's, actually in the doc, there's a few members who are kind of skipped who aren't mentioned, which is unfortunate. And I think the makers of the doc, they have to tell a story that spans about 50 years and
Sure.
90 minutes. So they kind of made that decision, which is a little unfortunate, but it's like, I'm not criticizing them for it. It's like, they gotta make this story fit, But Mark French was the drummer for 3 years, and he recorded Casino and then toured with the band for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Also, other members that that rarely get mentioned are Kim Deschamps, who's with us for 8 years, and who's
Right, pedal steel, yeah.
played pedal steel on 5 days in May, 5 days in July rather, and a few other records.
But everyone makes that mistake you just made, because the song and the album.
Yes, yeah.
Everyone makes that mistake.
Yeah.
Like, which is which?
And James Gray was with us for 13 years, and he's not mentioned in the doc.
Oh, just a moment on James, actually, since you brought up his name. Sadly, that's the only member of Blue Rodeo who's passed on.
Yes.
Is James Gray.
Yeah.
Would you share a little more about James? There's a member who won't be visiting me, sadly, in the basement.
James was James. I was actually the one that got James in the band. I'd known James from when I started playing in Toronto, and I loved James. But James was kind of also notoriously difficult, and he guested with a lot of bands, but he was not. No bands would sort of have him as a full-time member because he was kind of a difficult guy, but also a lovable guy. And so everybody loved James and appreciated James, but they were kind of like, yeah, he's kind of trouble, So it was funny when Bobby Wiseman left, James got in touch with me and he was like, man, I'd love to audition, and can you lend me some cassettes? So I gave him all my Blue Rodeo cassettes, but I didn't call him because he was difficult, And again, so we tried like a dozen keyboard players, and none of them were right. And I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to call James. So I called James. I was like, okay, you should come on audition. He was like, why didn't you call me sooner? And I was like, I don't know. Right. And he came down, and right away, they were like, he's perfect. He's the guy. And I remember the next day, talking to Jim, and we were flying somewhere, and I was like, okay, I gotta tell you, like, he's great and everything, but he's not easy. He's kind of difficult. And Jim was like, what are you talking about?
Right.
He's great. And then he ended up staying with us for 13 years.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was difficult. But James couldn't help that. It was just who he was. But he was also brilliant. And we had a great time. Like, he and I in particular fought so much. We used to room together. I think that lasted about 6 months. And then it was just like, okay, we can't room together anymore. We just fought all the time. And so, I mean, I got to say, some of it was me. It wasn't just James was difficult. Like, I was not always also, I wasn't like the easiest person, especially when I was younger. I think I'm a little more tolerable.
You've mellowed out?
I've mellowed a bit, over the last 30
Well,
years.
that sweater has helped remind you to rein it in.
It's helped me chill.
So James Gray, again, the only member of Blue Rodeo who's passed away. So he left the band in 2005.
Yes.
And then before we get to the great FOTM Mike Boguski, Bob Packwood is on organs for a few years.
Right. But Bob replaced James, and he lasted for 3 years. And Bob, also a great player, very quiet guy. But there was kind of underneath that sort of quiet thing, there was some, I guess, simmering resentments that kind of exploded in the studio one day, and that ended up being the end of Bob.
Bob Packwood. Because I'm going to ask you about the end of Bob Wiseman right now. Because so now again, I don't think you're not in the band for very long with Bob Wiseman, right? Like, what's the overlap period?
I think I was in the band for the recording of Lost Together, and I'd say it was might have been 4 or 5 months. He left. He was, even before I joined Blue Rodeo, I was working with Bob when I was still with Andrew Cash, because Bob was was going to produce Andrew's record after Boomtown. So we were doing some pre-production with him, and I remember thinking he was doing a great job, and I enjoyed working with him. Though I don't think he ended up completing that record, but I remember even then him expressing his dissatisfaction with being Blue Rodeo, and he was very vocal about his issues with Blue Rodeo. He would often talk about it in the press and stuff, and when doing his own press and things, and so I knew for years that he wasn't that happy in Blue Rodeo, and when I joined, it was like, whoa, this guy's really not into this,
Right.
Like I remember, him doing a rehearsal, and he would kind of be like leafing through Now magazine and kind of playing with the other hand, and Jim would be like, oh, Bobby, can you put the paper away? It was like really like his dissatisfaction with the band was really obvious, but. Right. But I think, they just sort of thought, well, he's our secret weapon, so, we got to put up with it. But shortly after I joined, I remember we played South by Southwest, and I think he got a publishing deal, and he was aspiring to be a producer and a solo artist. And so I think, the publishing deal kind of gave him the financial freedom to say, okay, I can walk away from this. So he did.
Well, so I've had the pleasure of having Bob Wiseman down here for a long chat, and it strikes me, because I just talked to Jane Siberry maybe before, just a little before, like really close to that time period, and how they're true artists. You know what I mean? Like Bob Wiseman, he's such a true artist. You see him, he gets immersed and lost in the art, and it all, having him talk about why he left Blue Rodeo, and then talking to Greg about the same thing. It's, Greg was very complimentary to Bob Wiseman, this musical genius, but just Bob didn't like being told what to do, it sounded like, when it came to his artistic expression.
Essentially, we're sidemen, and not everybody has the mentality to be a sideman. It's not easy. I had to learn to subsume my ego, and that took me many years. I'd love to say that I just walked in and I just immediately gave them what they wanted, and they were like, "Oh, thank God, this is so easy." Like I had lots of conflicts in the studio with Jim and Greg, Greg is very much. Jim is a bit more of a play what you feel guy. Sometimes he'll have like an idea, like for instance, in 5 Days in May, the drum pattern on that was his idea. It's like, I'd like you to go like do da on the snare drum with the brushes. He told me to do that. I didn't go like, this is what I would play. And it was absolutely the right thing to play on the song. And other times I've had my own ideas and felt like, whoa, what makes you think you know better than me? I'm the drummer,
Right.
But in the end, it's your job to help realize the songwriter's vision. And, some people, ultimately I've come around to seeing that's my job. My job isn't to sort of show people that I can play amazing fills. My job is to play the song and tell the story of the song on the drum kit. And there's an art to that. There's enough of an art to that, and that no matter how simple it may be, that in itself is enough and should be enough. And I'm not saying that that wasn't enough for Bobby, but like Bobby is someone who just like has his own vision, and I know lots of musicians like that. Lots of musicians that are just like, no, like if you want me to play, then I do my thing. And if you don't like that, then you need to get somebody else. And I think he was a bit more one of those guys, and he's just not really someone who's meant to be a sound man. He's meant to do his own thing, to produce people, and that's fine too. And I just think that has a lot to do with why he moved on from rodeo.
So Bob moves on, and we talked about James Gray, who sadly passed away in 2013. We lost James Gray.
Yeah.
One name we haven't actually mentioned is, other than Jim and Greg, which I'll get back to actually, there's a member of the band that's been there since the beginning, and Basil Donovan. So you are the fourth longest serving member of Blue Rodeo after the three founders, Jim, Greg, and Basil.
Yes.
You were there. So 91, you show up. The band forms in 84, but you show up
85.
Okay, 85. Okay, good back check.
This is the 40th year.
Okay. 40th anniversary of Blue Rodeo. That's why we're getting all the noise. We're getting the stamps. We're getting the documentary. We're like time to recognize this great band in our midst, Blue Rodeo. But when it comes to Blue Rodeo, I was at Massey Hall last year for the inducted Jim and Greg into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Ron McLean made this fun speech and talked to Greg about this on Toronto Mike. You guys can check that out. Is Blue Rodeo, is it like Bon Jovi? And what I mean by that is like Bon Jovi. There's a guy named Bon Jovi, and it's his band, and he's got these hired guns, if you will, to execute the songs. But is it? And again, there's no disrespect here because you're all, Basil, yourself, Michael Boguski, Colin Cripps, Jimmy Boskill. Like, is it Jim and Greg's band, and then you're all there not to pollute the process?
It's Jim and Greg's band, but we are all there to pollute the process.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say we pollute it. But like the band wouldn't be the same without Basil on bass. Right. Basil's a distinct part of the band's sound. His melodic bass lines are a really important part of the band's sound. And I think everybody who's been in the band, especially people who've been in it for a considerable amount of time, have had a part in creating the template that is Blue Rodeo. Like obviously Bobby Wiseman was a big part of that. And Cleve too, like when I joined, I remember Jim saying to me, well, this is what our drumming thing is like. There's a lot of simple single stroke rolls and things like that, which I immediately did away with. Like, I mean, yeah, that was Cleve's thing, but that ain't my thing. And so I've been part of the template as well in that, say the record 5 days, 5 days in July, being a drummer who could play sort of softer stuff and use brushes and things like that. And, that was kind of my part in helping expand the band's sound. So, I think we've all, and, having Pedal Steel in the band brought yet another dimension to it, and now say the band as it exists now, we have two wicked guitar slingers in the band. We have Colin Cripps and we have Jimmy Boskill, which is kind of like, which has made the band, even more sort of guitar centric.
Right.
And so like that's kind of expanded the template of the band again, and that now we have, a big part of our show is like these fiery dueling guitar solos, which was not a thing 35 years ago. So everybody contributes, but having said that, it's Jim and Greg's band. The defining sound of the band are Jim and Greg's voices and Jim and Greg's songwriting. Those are the essential key elements. Everything else is important. Everything else contributes to the character of the band. Everything else has helped make the band what it is. But what it really boils down to is their songs and their voices. That is what the band is.
Glenn, when the Tragically Hip had to stop touring, when Gord became ill, did you feel at all like, oh, it's now on us in Blue Rodeo. We are now the Canadian rock touring band, the de facto house band for this country?
I know. I gotta say, I don't really think that way.
Okay.
I don't really go like, we're Canada's band, or something. Which, and then it's funny because somebody, I think Andy Mays said that in the documentary, and then they used that in like an ad, and then there was like 75 people going, they're not Canada's band, Blue Rodeo, Tragically Hip are Canada's band, the Guess Who are Canada's band,
Sky Diggers are Canada's band,
Rush are Canada's band. It's like I don't. It's not like we aspire to be Canada's band or we see ourselves as Canada's band. Like, I just think of us as one of thousands of great bands in Canada, Okay,
but it's interesting. All those bands you named are no longer active, right? Because Rush is done and Hip is done. Okay. Guess Who might be coming back, but we'll see. There's a rumor, but they might, the real right.
I don't know. There's lots of great, I guess from a process of elimination, maybe we're still in terms of a long-term band, I guess, to be honest, like I honestly haven't thought about this. I haven't thought about like
It's not important to you.
No, it's
you're
not.
just a great live band and you tour for your fans and
I'm just like
you
I'm
enjoy
just
playing the music.
I just can't believe we're still doing it, and I'm just so happy we're still doing it. It is like such a blessing and a boon. And you know, when I joined the band, I thought like, cool, man, I'm gonna be like I'm gonna have a steady gig for like 5 years. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So it's like that's been 33 years now. So it's like I just go
Amazing.
Like, yeah. So I go, holy shit, you know, like it's amazing, and I just kind of look at it like that. But I just don't really look at it beyond that.
What's it like from behind the kit when you're closing a show and everyone is singing Lost together? Like I played it and I can hear the crowd. I've been to so many Blue Rodeo concerts and the crowd singing. It's just that moment. What's it like from behind the kit during that moment?
Well, this is where I get kind of emotional. But yeah, sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
I don't want to be the guy that's like cries every time you talk about this. But because this happened in the doc too. But yeah, it's like I guess I've had lots of moments where I've looked at that and just went, you know, yeah, I just feel incredibly grateful. It's still happening, and touched, you know. And it's not like I feel that every time, but I try to now, because there was, as I said this in the doc, there was a time when I kind of took it for granted, you know, and then after a while I realized like this is a miracle that this is still happening, you know, that these people are still here for us, and that we still mean something to them. And I think that is the thing about this band that's so special to me. Is, you know, when I started playing drums, I always thought like I'd like to be in a band where people think I'm an awesome drummer and I can play lots of crazy fills and I didn't end up in a band like that. I didn't end up in a band where it was like the drums are super flashy and everybody's going like, oh my God, the drummer can play so many notes. You know, I ended up in a band where the songs mean an incredible amount to people. And we did this gig a couple of years ago. It was this gig in Oka, Quebec. And it was a bit of an odd gig. It was the first time the promoters had done a gig. It was like the first show they'd ever put on. And the site was kind of weird. It ended up being super muddy, and they didn't really know what they were doing in terms of promotion, so it was a little undersold. So we're all like, oh my God, what is this gig gonna be like? And so we go there, and like, there's this muddy field, and there's maybe 1,000 people there. But it's daylight, and you can see people while we're playing, which also doesn't happen very often. And we're playing like 5 days, and I see this 2 women holding each other. And like, sorry, yeah, but like bawling all the way through the song, you know. And I realized that like they're crying because this was like their dad's favorite song or their husband's favorite song or someone that they loved, you know, who's not with them anymore. And it's bringing that person back to them. And then a few songs later, I see the same thing, like on the other side of the crowd, 2 women just holding each other, bawling all the way through the song. And I kind of got like I am right now, you know, like, because I thought like, oh, like this is what this means to people, you know, like this music. You got any Kleenex? Sorry, man. I was worried this was going to happen. Never mind, I'll use the sleeve of my alpaca sweater. But anyway, sorry, man. Sorry, people. But what this band gives to people through the songs and through is like, yay, Kleenex, is like, you know, is just like a a meaning. It has a meaningfulness to people that like I never imagined or could have foreseen. You know, when I joined the band, when I started playing music, when I started playing drums, like that's like an incredible gift. So that's what I think about when I see people singing Lost Together, when we do gigs. Just that's what I think about with this band. Like this band gave me something I never could have imagined when I started playing music. And I'm really grateful for that.
It's magic. It's magic. It's magic. And we're all grateful. I'll tell you, I'm grateful. I've seen your band live. I've seen you, you know. How many times have you played that Budweiser stage last? Has anyone played it more than you?
No, we've played it the most. I think we're at something like 20. I think we might be 24, 25 times now. Jeez. 25 times we played it.
Wow. And there's always that moment during Lost Together when you're singing at the top of your lungs and you're not alone. You're surrounded. The whole place is jammed with people singing at the top of their lungs, and it's magic. It's magic. All right.
We got to talk about something less emotional.
Well, here, let me ask you: what is your favorite Blue Rodeo song to play? Do you have a?
That's a hard one. I somebody asked that before, and I.
How dare they take my question?
Well, I don't know. I like there's the odd one, and I like playing all of them.
They're all good.
Yeah. I don't really go, oh yay, this is my favorite.
Well, we can move on to the listener questions here, okay? So that we're gonna cover some. By the way, is your I think you posted this. Your wife, you have a wife named Monica?
Yes, that's my wife.
I have a wife named Monica.
Oh, what a coincidence!
But they're not the same Monica, right? Just checking.
Not.
Okay, let's hope not. Right? And did she film in Shoresy?
She's a cinematographer, camera operator. I never know which one to call her. Like, it depends on what she's doing.
Right.
But she is a camera operator in Shoresy, and she shot both Shoresy and Letterkenny, the show that it spun off from.
Okay, well, the guy who hosts Yes, We Are Open, which is why you have that great speaker from Anaris, he hosts like the definitive Shoresy / Letterkenny podcast called The Produce Stand. So I'm just shouting, maybe if your wife, Monica, can, I don't know, I think everybody knows on the set or whatever, but shout out to Al Grego and The Produce Stand and
cool.
your wife who films for Shoresy. I think that's pretty cool. In Sudbury, right?
Yeah, she's actually just coming back today from Sudbury from a 5-week shoot. They're just shooting season 3 of Shoresy.
Okay, cool.
Or maybe season 4, I can't remember.
And are you working and covering my little questions that I'm going to burn with? But I had Colin Brunton was on this show.
Yeah.
And somebody heard him on Toronto Mike and gave $10,000 towards the making of the Nash the Slash documentary he's working on.
Right, wow.
Are you working on a Nash the Slash tribute album?
I actually, with Ian Blurton,
who's here Wednesday.
Oh, he's here Wednesday, but so I'm in a band with Ian Blurton's Future Now.
Yeah.
And we have contributed a version of Phasers on Stun, which is a song by FM, of which Toronto band that Nash the Slash was a member of.
Wow. Okay, see how everything's connected? Everything comes full circle.
Everything's
connected here. Okay, let me get to these questions from the listenership. And again, no particular order. Although, no, you know what? I'm the boss around here, Glenn. Okay, I do want to just play a bit of this. That vocal sounds a bit like Gord Downey, actually, as I hear this vocal.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. That's my brother singing.
Yeah.
Though I can't say I would say any resemblance to Gord Downey is entirely coincidental. My brother was not influenced by Gord Downey in any way. All due respect to Gord. But yeah, that's my brother. That's not me on drums. I did play with him. We did do a duo recording that was never officially released, though you can find it on Bandcamp. It's called Starvin' Hungry. I think it's called demos, 1999 or something like that.
So this band is called Starvin' Hungry, or this
Yeah.
project, and that's your twin brother John's project.
Yes, that's my twin brother John's project. That would be the Montreal version of the band. He moved to Montreal. I recorded with him in 1999, and I played with him from 97 to 99. And then he fired me because I was too busy with Blue Rodeo. And then he had a Toronto version of the band that had Nick Sewell in it, who is currently in Biblical and Mount Cyanide, bass player and leader of those two bands, and also the drummer John Card, who was a drummer for DOA. So that was the Toronto version of Starvin' Hungry, and then John moved to Montreal and formed a Montreal version of Starvin' Hungry, which is what we're listening to there. And I love my brother's songs. That band no longer exists. He broke it up quite a while ago, but I thought my brother was a great rock and roll singer and songwriter, and I really enjoyed playing with him until he fired me. We fought a lot, though. Oh my God! I don't
Well, you're
recommend
twins. I don't know what that could be like. I don't have a twin. But,
there's always stories about bands with siblings in them, and how the siblings just fight like crazy, and it's so true.
Okay, just a few seconds of this before I fade it down. So.
Swallowed everything.
You know, it gored maybe a little, not that they were influential, but the Strokes. Can you hear a bit of...
Yeah, my brother didn't like the Strokes either.
It's funny.
He was like, they're this clean guitar sounds. I don't get it. My brother was, or especially at that time, was like heavily influenced by kind of blues, and he was really into American garage punk. He was really into the Flat Duo Jets, who were this guy Dexter Romweber, and who died recently, who were also coincidentally a big influence on the White Stripes. And it was funny that my brother and I were a duo. This was in '99. You know, like we basically formed around the same time as the White Stripes, and I think people might have thought we were ripping them off, but it was actually he was just happened to be influenced by the same people that Jack White was, and kind of had similar musical ideas.
Not quite Blue Rodeo, is it? Okay.
No.
Hamilton Mike. Shout out to Hamilton Mike, who comes to many he comes to the Palma Pasta events, I noticed. Because he's in Hamilton. But Mike, get to Great Lakes Brewery on June 26th for TMLX 18. Okay, Hamilton Mike? Ask Glenn about his times playing with Mike Treblecock in Simply Saucer and playing he also says Andy Curran's kick-ass solo album from 1990, and of course Change of Heart. But Mike Treblecock, of course, I know him best. Funny thing is, these drumsticks you were holding, Gene Champagne is now the drummer for Teenage Head,
and he was a drummer for
Killjoys.
Yeah.
And that's Mike Treblecock's band. But tell me about playing with Mike Treblecock.
Well, I played with Mike Treblecock in Simply Saucer, which was Simply Saucer was a band that was formed. I think they were formed in like '72. In '74, they made a record called Cyborgs Revisited that became something of an underground classic. It's like described as a psychedelic punk record, which is as good a description of it as anything. It's a really noisy record, but quite brilliant and sort of I don't know if it's ahead of its time. It was kind of ahead. It was ahead of its time. It was and sort of its time as well. And I was a fan of that record, and I met Edgar Bro, the leader and founder of that band, when. My band that I had called the Swallows, which was a band that I sang and played guitar in and wrote the songs for. We played This Ain't Hollywood in Hamilton, and I can't remember if we were opening for Edgar or Edgar was opening for us. But I met him, and I got him to sign my Simply Saucer CD. And then a little while after that, he asked me if I'd like to play in Simply Saucer, and I did. And I did one short U.S. tour with them, and I did some Hamilton shows and Toronto shows, and I actually just saw Edgar play solo just the night before last, and he was great. He also does solo stuff, but I really enjoyed playing with Simply Saucer, and then he had Mike Treblecock on second guitar, and Kevin Christoph is his bass player. He's the original member of Simply Saucer, and those guys have been playing together for 53 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's lots of time for Blue Rodeo. Come on.
You call me up when you're done with him, but you tell me that's just done. I don't need much to get by. If I can't have the cake, I'll settle for the crumbs. But the day is gonna come when I can't wait anymore. No, I can't wait anymore. Sister, I'm turning blue. I'm holding my breath for a dream gone dead. I'm kicking the Jones for you, 'cause the truth don't fit inside my head. You ain't no baby mother, I'm not some kind of brother, but we're supposed to work it out. I'm trying to stay back, I'm trying to stay cool, I'm trying not to shout, but I'm beginning to have my doubts. If I can
Fucking sounds great. This is the Swallows. This is you, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the first song of the first Swallows record.
And when you hear this in the headphones, I don't know how long it's been since you listened to this in the headphones, but what do you think when you hear this?
Vocals are a little pitchy.
Wait, I don't know. I can't judge that, man. It sounds good to my ears. It sounds like a little bit like a little Lou Reed influence. Any Lou Reed influence in the vocals?
Not intentionally.
I don't have the ear. I don't have.
Oh no,
the
I
ear.
think I would take that though. Lou Reed. I mean, I love Lou Reed. But I don't know what my influences were when I wrote that song. That was a long time ago. That I recorded that in like '97. It came out in '99.
Yeah, 25 years ago.
But
Okay, but you said the Swallows. I didn't want to wrap up these questions and play you out if I didn't play any Swallows.
no, thanks for doing that. I appreciate
that's
that.
cool.
Yeah, the Swallows were.
Turning Blue.
That was an important project for me. It lasted, I think, about 10 years. But it was something I ended up having difficulty sustaining just because, I was playing in a bunch of bands, and when I married my wife, we had 2 kids. I already have 2 older kids, and I have 2 younger kids.
I'm in the same boat, buddy. We both have a Monica. So you have 2 kids of Monica?
Yes, I do.
And you had 2 kids already?
Yeah.
That's my bio, man.
Oh, there we go. We have the same bio. So yeah, but once my 4th child was born, I just didn't have time to keep doing the Swallows, and I would have if it was a more profitable venture, but it wasn't, and just time wise, I couldn't do it anymore. So I ended up putting it aside.
So speaking of the Queen Street West scene and everything we've been talking about, but there's a guy who's been over, love this guy, and speaking of Ian Blurden, but is John Bora in the Swallows?
John Bora was the one other member of the Swallows who, like, we had a couple of different guitarists, but John was the other consistent member. I
He's
love
fantastic, John Bora.
John Bora is one of my heroes. Like him and Ian Blurton are sort of 2 local heroes of mine, guys who are lifers, and who, didn't get rich doing this, but have stuck with it because they love it, they believe in it, and because they're true lifers. And I was very lucky to get in Blue Rodeo, but I was prepared to, when I decided like I got to do this, I can't do anything else. I was fully prepared to hey, if I got to live in a basement apartment the rest of my life, that's fine. Right. As long as I'm doing what I love to do. And that's where those guys are at too. And I really respect and love them for that. And they've also just made an incredible contribution to the community and to Canadian music in general,
Absolutely. Okay, question time. So we think we hit one yet. Okay, Brian Dunn. Oh yeah, we had Hamilton Mike. Brian Dunn writes in, Glenn was the drummer for my cousin Will's band Groovy Religion, managed by FOTM Jeff Rogers.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd love to hear any memories, and you did mention it briefly off the top, but any further memories for Brian, who's like, oh, my cousin Will was in that band. Groovy Religion.
Yeah, Groovy Religion were... that was a really fun band. When I first saw them, they didn't have a drummer. They just had a drum machine. And William was like this sort of dark, mysterious figure on Queen Street. He was the first guy that had dreadlocks, like a white guy that had dreadlocks, but not in the kind of way of like trying to be a Rasta. He was just like, I don't know, his hair was so unkempt, it just became dreadlocked. And, he was kind of a notorious druggie, which I don't think he would love. But I mean, there's a comic book about him called Our William that actually is going to be, that was in Exclaim magazine, serialized in Exclaim magazine for a number of years. And they've been putting issues of it, I guess segments of it online, and they're going to do it again in a book, and that goes into some detail about William's proclivities,
vices.
Yeah, and so I guess I can talk about that. But yeah, he was kind of he was known to be this druggy guy and kind of this dark figure. And he came up and asked me if I'd be interested in drumming Groovy Religion, and I did. And that was a band that I would say that was the least prolific band I've ever played in. Like I remember we wrote a rock opera. They wrote a rock opera called Tom, which was I ended up making 2 records with them. One was this record called Thin Gypsy Thief, which was like kind of a 6-song EP that we recorded in Montreal in like '85. And I think we only had like 4 songs. I think we wrote a song in the studio. And then we had the rock opera Tom after that took something like, I don't know how many years that took to write. It was like half an hour long, and it probably took 10 years for them to write it.
Holy smokes.
But that was pretty good. I love Tom, and that ended up being recorded as well. Okay. But it wasn't a band that played a lot, but it was always fun. And William is a great character. He's a lovely guy, a very literate guy. Also in that band were the guitarist Steve Mahabir, who's since done a solo record that me and Mike Boguski and John Bora all played on, and we recorded a second one with him that he's about to release with the late Peter Moore engineering producing. And the great Peter Moore, who was also most well known for recording and producing the Trinity Sessions by the Callaway Junkins. But and Scott B was the bass player. Scott Bradshaw, Scott B Sympathy was the bass player in Groovy Religion, and he was a fantastic, really cool bass player. But it went on. He sort of decided to dedicate himself to the Scott B Sympathy, his band. So then he was replaced by John Bora. And then I eventually got busy with other bands like Andrew Cash and Blue Rodeo. So I was first replaced by a guy named Mike Polawoda, and then John Lally, who is also the drummer for Rusty, took my place. Speaking
of wearing dreadlocks, Ken was rocking those dreadlocks.
Yes, I think he got that from William, I'm going to say.
All right, now he's living in the aforementioned Sudbury.
He's a Sudbury guy now.
Wow.
Yeah, everything ties together on this show.
This is unbelievable. I know you've been amazing. Okay, so Glenn, I'll say it now, right now. You've been amazing. Glenn of 2 N's, that's what I'm calling you now. You've been amazing. I'm not going to let you leave till I finish all these questions, but I have a few more here. But and funny thing is, I did Hamilton Mike, And I got a bunch of other Mikes have chimed in, like Mike from K-Dub, who says, "Hey, Toronto Mike, Glenn plays such a wide range of styles and genres. Can you ask him to talk a little bit about playing with Ian Blurden's future now? Him and Anna Ruddock were an unbelievable rhythm section for that show." So you have touched on this, but maybe Ian needs a bit more props. I don't know. I like Ian Blurden, all of his stuff, but I got a lot of time for that guy. Like, I just think Ian Blurden is one of those musical geniuses that you might be biking on, I don't know, the waterfront trail, and there he goes. Like, I've seen him biking on the waterfront trail. I'm like, Ian Blurden. It's like,
Yeah, that's him biking to his studio that's down on Polson and
That's it.
Polson, yeah. So he's
Cherry Beach
he's,
area,
he's
yeah.
always on his. That's how he gets there, on his folding bike.
my kind of guy.
Yeah.
My kind of guy. But so I don't know. Just in maybe we've said enough about the great Ian Blurden. And again, everyone listening, Wednesday I've got Ian and some other founding members of Change of Heart, because they've made new music for the first time in 27 years.
Yeah. And I'm on that Change of Heart record as well. Actually, I'm on 4 songs, and then Damon Richardson, who's going to be playing the shows, is on 4 songs, and then the original drummer Ron Duffy is on 2 songs on that record.
Are you going to be at the Geary Street?
I'm coming with my daughter, Willa, who's 26, and who was like, "Are you playing these shows with Change of Heart? I'm obsessed with Change of Heart now." And I'm
she
like,
should be.
"What? You're obsessed with Change of Heart?" and I was like, "No, but
Pat's
I'll
decline.
Yeah. But I was like, "I'll go with you." So I'm going with my daughter on the
Which
Friday.
night? Friday.
Friday.
I can't remember now, but I'm going to one of those nights as well.
Right,
I
it's a
think
Friday
that-
and a Saturday. Yeah, so I'm.
Which one was added last? Do you remember? Because
maybe
I
the
was at-
Friday. I think.
Okay,
'cause
then
that
I'm
was-
at the Saturday. I'm at whatever the first one announced
Yeah,
was.
I think the Saturday was the first one because
Jeez.
Friday was the one that Ian said he could fit me in on, so I assume that was the second one.
Okay,
But
amazing.
But yeah, let's talk about Ian, because like Ian's amazing, and I've known him, for decades. Like he's one of the first people I knew when I came to Toronto. And I always liked Change of Heart. I remember, actually, the first time I heard of Change of Heart, I was in the Record Peddler, and it was probably 1982. And the bass player came up to me, and actually, he was with the manager, Scratch Anderson. And I think Scratch just thought I was cute, and they saw me buying records or something, and they were like, "Hey, we got this band called Change of Heart. You should listen to this cassette." And they gave me this cassette, and it was
This is
called
Rob Taylor?
Rob Taylor and Scratch Anderson, who was their manager at the time, and they had this compilation cassette called "Arming the Hand," and it was like Change of Heart and a few other bands whose names are escaping me, but I remember really liking the Change of Heart songs and thinking, "Wow, these guys sound like Echo and the Bunnymen. They're cool." And so that was the first time I'd heard of Ian. And then I met him when I started playing in Toronto, and of course I played on Smile, and I also played on one of his solo projects that he did post Change of Heart. Blurtonia, that was it.
Yeah.
And then when he formed Future Now, he wanted to be a metal band, and he wanted someone who could play double kick, like double pedals, and which I did when I was in Smile. So he got me to play on the recordings, and then be part of the band, and I love that band, and that's like pretty much a full on. We kind of call it proto metal. I think that's what he calls it. Like the style is kind of based on like more sort of early '80s British metal, like Iron Maiden, early Maiden and Priest, and that sort of thing. But that band is an absolute joy to play in. Anna Ruddock is incredible in it. She's one of my favorite bass players and one of my favorite people. And Aaron Goldstein, another pillar of the community, fantastic musician, a beautiful person, is the second guitarist. So like, there's just nothing not to love about being in that band. It's Ian's tunes are great. It's definitely, I'd say it's the second loudest band I've ever played in. The loudest probably being Big Sugar, who I played with briefly. I did like half a dozen shows with Big Sugar, and I think they were maybe the only band. I think Gordy's like the only guy louder than Ian Blurden.
He's got the 2 guitar necks, okay?
Yeah, he had a 4 100-watt Marshalls.
Jeez, okay. I mentioned it's the old Mike show, so there's another Mike Doran. Duran? I don't think I've ever said it out loud. Okay.
Duran.
Duran. Right. This is Mike Duran. Okay. I'm going to read these names to you. Carl Burns, Simon Wollstonecraft, or Kieran Melling.
Okay, so he's asking who my favorite drummers are in the fall, because one of the bands I play in is Mr. Pharmacist, who are we are a fall cover band. And a lot of people aren't familiar with the Fall, but the Fall are a band I've loved since I was about 17 or 18. A British independent band that formed in 1977 and lasted until Marky Smith, the singer, died a few years ago. And they made something like 32 albums. And Carl Burns, first of all, who is the original drummer, and he's my favorite. He's a great drummer and really unique style, hard-hitting, super solid drummer. Though the other guys are great too. Kieran Melling was the last drummer. He's awesome. And Simon Wollstonecraft, who is known as Funky Si. He was kind of like the 90s drummer. He's known as Funky Si by Fall fans. They're all great. I like Funky Si, but Carl Burns kind of set the template. So, and I'm a lifelong Fall fan, and I love playing a Mr. Pharmacist.
Well, there's a follow-up Fall question, which is there a Fall song that Glenn would like to see Mr. Pharmacist play but hasn't got it into the set list yet?
Well, maybe one I think of a lot is maybe, I don't know, not Spectre versus Rector. I do have a fondness for sort of earlier Fall stuff. So probably New Face in Hell. We haven't done New Face in Hell, and I like that one a lot. We should probably do that one of these days.
Okay, almost done here. Neil writes in, Greg Keeler and Jim Cuddy have been referred to as Canada's Lennon and McCartney. Are you Canada's Ringo? Why is the answer yes, and why is that awesome? This is Neil.
Unfortunately, the answer is no. I'm not Canada's Ringo. But it would be awesome to be Canada's Ringo. But I'm just too different from Ringo as a drummer. Though I love Ringo, and I'm there are drummers that are like, yeah, Ringo wasn't that great. But it's like, no, Ringo was great. Ringo came up with bitchin' drum parts,
right? And
Ringo grooved hard, and Ringo had a great sound, a sound that like many drummers, including me, have emulated. You know, that sort of T-towel on the toms or on the snare thing. Like I don't know if he was the first to do that, but he was absolutely the drummer that popularized that. And I've certainly done that a lot on Blue Rodeo records because, of course, Jim and Greg are huge Beatles fans, and they absolutely patted themselves after Lennon and McCartney. That's why all Blue Rodeo songs are credited Keeler Cuddy, because of McCartney, Lennon. You know, like Lennon and McCartney, or they were like, well, that's what they did, so that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And the way they sing together, and the Beatles are always going to be Jim and Greg's favorite band. But I would love to. I would not be averse to saying I'm Canada's Ringo Starr, but I'm not. I've just played in too many other different types of bands and played too many different styles to sort of go, I'm Ringo. Like Ringo is one of those drummers. I'm also just, I would love to be one of those drummers who's instantly recognizable. Another drummer like that, I think, is Charlie Watts, who I actually named my eldest son Charlie after Charlie Watts. I love Charlie Watts, and Charlie Watts is not a technically astounding drummer, but Charlie Watts has like this instantly recognizable sound and feel, which I've always loved, and I always loved how humble he was, and that he was like this stylish, quiet guy who just had this workman-like approach to his job and just played the songs, and nobody sounds like Charlie Watts. And I would love to be one of those drummers, like one of those instantly recognizable drummers, but I'm not. I'm like kind of more of a chameleon,
Well, Neil's asking about what you thought of another Neil Peart.
Neil Peart, I love Neil Peart. I went through, and I was a huge Rush fan as a kid. And I remember when A Farewell to Kings came out, CFMY played it in its entirety. It was in 1977, And they were like, we're going to play the new Rush album in its entirety at such and such a time. And I remember listening to it, and it blew my mind. And I thought, I can't believe a band from Toronto made this record. Like, this is like Yes, because I was a prog fan at the time.
Sure.
It's like, this is like Yes or Genesis or something, but they're from Toronto. I can't believe it. And I remember learning how to play the drums to that whole record, like playing along with that whole record. And then when I was about 15 and cast aside, as I mentioned earlier, my love of prog, and was like, no, I don't like prog anymore. I like punk rock and post-punk and new wave.
Right.
We didn't call it post-punk then. It was just like new wave and stuff. And then I literally broke all my, like my brother and I, we literally smashed all our non-punk, non-new wave records like idiots. But it was like, we were doing this purge. And
Sure.
and so then I was like, no, I don't like Rush anymore. It's too complicated. And Neil Peart doesn't groove and all that stuff. And I kind of held that belief for decades until I saw the Rush documentary Beyond the Lighted Stage, which was directed by Dale Heslip, who also directed Lost Together, the Blue Rodeo.
I don't even know
doc.
if we touched on it, and I was going to play off in a moment, but that's an excellent documentary. I thoroughly enjoyed Lost Together.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I enjoyed it too. I also enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Needed
a
more
lot.
Boguski, but otherwise it was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, like I say, they had to.
He's in the band now.
He's in the band, but he's in there. He's in there.
And he's been in there a long time. I think he might be the longest serving keyboardist. Maybe, or close.
Yes, he is the longest serving keyboard player. He has been in the band 16 years now. Yeah. Next to him was James Gray, who was 13 years.
Right.
And then Bobby, who was 7 years, and then Bob.
And you see him
Hackwood,
playing at the end, but I just thought maybe a little.
He's got a little brief interview time in there, but yeah. But anyway,
just looking out for my boy over here.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, you're a fellow Etobicoke guy. It's like not enough Etobicoke in that.
And
dog.
west of Jane, him and Cleve. Yeah.
So yes, Mike maybe he was one of a few people that suffered from in that dog, and that really comes down to lack of time. To be fair to Dale, Dale himself said, like, I wish I could have done a 4-parter like.
And he's
the
making
Hit
it for the
did.
masses.
Yeah,
he did a
well,
great
it's
job.
again, he's had 90 minutes, and it's like it's just tough to squeeze all that story in. Oh. But when my point about we were talking about Neil Peart.
Yeah.
So when I saw Beyond the Lighted Stage, first of all, it renewed my respect for Rush, and then it also made me realize how many licks I play that I still play that are Neil Peart looks. And I thought, like, oh, here I am all these years going, nah, Neil Peart, like, he wasn't really my thing. And then realizing that there was still a lot of Neil Peart in my drumming DNA, and that I have to give that man his due respect.
Now, we talk about Rush here, but were you a Triumph fan?
No.
Okay, only asking because Gilmore visits tomorrow. So,
yes. Gilmore, very nice guy. I actually got to play with Rick Emmett once with Andy Curran. We were, I guess, Andy Curran and Soho 69 backed up Rick Emmett at a 80s Junos night at the Horseshoe about 10 years ago. Okay. Rick Emmett's a wonderful musician, and I absolutely respect those guys. But was I a fan of Triumph? No. I wasn't. What can I say? I
don't want you to. Yeah, we'll smoke a bass here. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last two questions. Although one's kind of a joke and only a question. But Movie Vigilante just said, ask him which band had more drummers, Blue Rodeo or Spinal Tap. And I'm just here to chime in that Pearl Jam has had more drummers than Blue Rodeo. That's all I'm here to say.
Blue Rodeo only had 3 drummers, so like Spinal Tap had more drummers. Come on.
Well, they were blowing up, as I recall, yeah, and they're making a sequel to Spinal Tap.
Oh, thank God!
So it's finally here. Okay, last question goes to Elephants and Stars. So hello to Manfred. Who is his favorite band for whom he did session work? So this is an impossible question, but is there a band
well,
for
I
whom
did
you...
do session work for Elephants and the Stars and Stars?
Is that's the answer then, right?
That's a favorite band who I did session work for. Gosh,
Manfred is crossing his fingers right now.
Yeah. Gosh. I've played on a lot of sessions. I don't know. There's too. That's too hard to answer. There's been so many sessions, and they're all very different, and so I'm sorry I don't have an answer for that, but I'm grateful for all the sessions. Thanks for hiring me. Think of me next time.
Think of Glenn when you're looking for a drummer, okay? Glenn Milchem. Man, I got to say, thanks for all the years of music and for this great chat and for your work in Blue Rodeo. The nation thanks you. And is there anything you were like on your way here and you said, oh, I got to make sure I share this or tell this, and then here I am wrapping you off. I don't want you to forget it. Like, is there something?
No, I think I've said all the things I wanted to say, and I really did want to say that thing about Blue Rodeo. You know, that I'm really grateful. That the thing that I'm most grateful about being in that band is that it happens to be a band whose songs have touched people so much, and I feel so lucky to be connected with that and have been a part of that. And I really did want to say that, and thank you, and just thanks to people for listening, and I'm very grateful and feel very fortunate.
Rob Pruce is on the live stream, and he says, speaking of drummers, did Glenn prefer Chris Partridge 1 or Chris Partridge 2?
Oh, from the Partridge family. I'm going to say Chris Partridge 1 because, like, when I was in grade 2, I was so into the Partridge family, I signed my name Jeremy. I thought that maybe the original drummer was Jeremy, or maybe it was the actor's name was Jeremy, but I wanted to be the drummer in the Partridge family so bad that I signed my school assignments as Jeremy.
That's amazing.
So I'd say Chris Partridge 1.
And what's amazing is, as I read that question from Rob Pruce, who was the keyboardist in Spoons and Honeymoon Suite, this version of Lowest of the Lows, Rosie and Gray was performed by Rob Pruce.
Everything in this show
Isn't that
just
weird?
ties in. Like, it's just incredible.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,666th show. That's a good number you got, 1666.
This is the neighbor of the beast, I think, or 1,000.
Yeah, you're a lucky son of a bitch, 1,000 away. Go to TorontoMike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. Go see, if you haven't seen Blue Rodeo in concert yet, rectify that immediately. What a great live band Blue Rodeo is.
Yeah, you got to see Blue Rodeo. We got to shill for Blue Rodeo here.
It's a new up-and-coming indie band. They need some help here.
Yeah,
okay.
help us out.
Much love to all who made this possible. Again, that's Great Lakes Brewery. Don't forget your beer. Palma Pasta, don't leave without your lasagna. Maneras, you've got your speaker. Silver Wax, you got a whole freaking kit. This is amazing. Silverwax.ca.
Gonna get the kids to wax the car.
It's gonna be a clean car, man. RecycleMyElectronics.ca, Building Toronto Skyline, and Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow when my guest, live in the basement here, founding member of Triumph, Gil Moore. He's also a hell of a golfer, just like Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
See you all then.